There's a feeling. You felt it, probably from both sides. When you meet someone, something sends a signal. Too much, too fast, something's not right here. They've been kind, interested, present. But the interest has a quality to it you can feel without describing. Like pressure. Like a hand on your shoulder that's slightly too firm for how recently you met. And on the other side, you've been that person too. Monitoring someone's response to everything you say. Calculating how long to wait before texting back. Feeling the terror of a conversation ending. Because ending means the reassurance stops. Today, we're going to take neediness seriously. Not as a personality flaw. Not as something to shame yourself out of. As a signal. Specific. Meaningful. Pointing directly at something that happened long before the person in front of you existed. We'll explain why healthy people feel it before they can name it, and why that response is not a mistake. First, let's be precise, because neediness gets misdiagnosed constantly. People confuse it with having needs, which is not the same thing at all. People confuse it with wanting intimacy, which is healthy and human. People confuse it with caring deeply, which is a quality, not a pathology. Neediness is what happens when the need for reassurance becomes insatiable. When the relief provided by connection lasts minutes rather than days. When a single text back sues for exactly as long as it takes to worry about whether the next one will come. It's not the wanting, it's the emptying. Psychologist Geraldine Downey studied rejection sensitivity, the degree to which a person anxiously expects, rapidly perceives, and overreacts to social rejection. Her research found that rejection-sensitive people don't just feel rejection more acutely when it happens. They perceive it when it hasn't happened. In ambiguous situations, their nervous system interprets ambiguity as rejection and responds accordingly, which means the reassurance they seek isn't actually about the other person. It's about a wound that predates the other person entirely. The other person has been cast in a role they didn't audition for, assigned a job. Be the evidence that I am worth staying for, that no single human being can perform reliably enough. And at some level, healthy people feel the weight of that job description before they've agreed to take it. Here's where it gets dark. The people most likely to be repelled by neediness are not the coldest. They're often the healthiest. Researchers Aaron and Aaron develop self-expansion theory. Humans are drawn toward relationships that expand their sense of self, that add to their world, their capabilities, their sense of possibility. Romantic attraction, about the felt sense that this person adds something, dimension, possibility, a world slightly larger than the one you had before. Neediness signals the opposite, not because needy people have nothing to offer, but because the signal neediness transmits communicates a relationship that will contract the world, rather than expand it. The healthy person can't name this. They don't walk away thinking this person's self-expansion quotient is insufficient. They just feel slightly tired, slightly responsible in a way they didn't agree to, slightly like the air in the room has a higher pressure than it should, and they move back. Not cruelly, naturally, but here's what makes this genuinely devastating. The person on the receiving end of that distance experiences it as rejection, exactly as Downey's research predicted. The nervous system primed to interpret ambiguity as abandonment receives the healthy person's natural need for space as confirmation of its deepest fear, and then escalates. This is the part that most videos about neediness never get to, because it requires saying something uncomfortable. The fear of rejection, when it's acute enough, becomes the primary cause of the rejection it fears. Not sometimes. Systematically, Downey's research followed this exact mechanism in real relationships. Individuals with high rejection sensitivity didn't just perceive rejection. Their behavior produced the very responses from partners that confirmed their fear. Specifically, the monitoring becomes visible. The need for reassurance becomes a drain. The hypervigilance to signs of withdrawal signals to the partner that they are being watched more than experienced. Intimacy requires a specific quality of presence, not observation, not monitoring, presence, the experience of being with someone rather than tracking them. Neediness, structurally, replaces presence with surveillance, and the person being surveilled feels it every time. Now, here's the cruelest layer. The people most likely to stay in the presence of neediness, who don't back away, are often not the healthiest people. They're the ones who need to be needed, the anxious attacher and the person with the savior complex. To people, two wounds, finding each other with uncanny precision, and calling it love. This is not a moral judgment. It is a description of how nervous systems sort themselves, how unresolved pain recognizes itself across a crowded room and feels, heartbreakingly, like home. Neediness doesn't come from weakness. It comes from the specific experience of learning early that love is not guaranteed. Psychologists Hausen and Shaver mapped adult romantic attachment styles onto Ainsworth's infant categories. The adult who seeks constant reassurance, who reads every silence as withdrawal, who feels the terror of a relationship at rest, as though stillness itself is the precursor to abandonment. That adult learns something foundational before they had words. Love is conditional. Love is intermittent. Love requires monitoring because it disappears without warning and returns without explanation. And the child who learned this became brilliant at one thing: detection, the reading of emotional weather with extraordinary sensitivity. The ability to know, before the adults in the room knew themselves, when something was shifting, when the warmth was about to be withdrawn. That skill is real. That sensitivity is not imagined. The person who grew up in emotional inconsistency developed a finely calibrated instrument for reading other people. The problem is not the instrument. The problem is that they still carry it into every room as though the room might turn dangerous, as though the person across from them might disappear without warning, as though the monitoring they perfected as a child is still the price of admission to love. It isn't anymore, and the tracking is costing you the thing you're trying to secure. I'm going to say something that sounds simple and isn't. The antidote to neediness is not wanting less. Telling someone with anxious attachment to want less is like telling someone with a fever to be cooler. Psychologist Roy Baumeister's research on the sociometer, the internal gauge humans use to track their social worth, found that people most destabilized by social uncertainty were those whose sociometer had only one input, one relationship, one person's opinion, one source of evidence that they matter, that they're wanted, that they're real in someone's eyes. When the sociometer has only one input, that input becomes a lifeline, and lifelines get gripped, and gripping is felt. And what is felt, by healthy people, is the weight of being someone's only source of proof. So the work, and it is work, real work, not insight, is expanding the inputs, not replacing the relationship, not becoming emotionally self-sufficient in some cold and defended way. Building a life that has enough substance, enough genuine engagement, enough sources of meaning and connection, and evidence of your own value, that no single person is required to carry all of it. This is what people mean when they say work on yourself, not self-improvement as performance, self-construction as foundation. The second practice, and this is the one that requires the most honesty about your own behavior in real time, when you feel the urge to check, confirm, seek reassurance, pause, not permanently, just long enough to ask, what am I actually afraid is happening right now? Name the fear specifically, not I'm anxious. Specifically, I'm afraid they've changed their mind. I'm afraid the silence means something I can't see. I'm afraid I'm already losing something I never fully had. Named, the fear becomes workable. Unnamed, it drives. And what it drives, the texting, the confirming, the need to compress distance that the other person hasn't created, pushes away the thing it's trying to secure. Third, the hardest, the longest, grieve the original inconsistency, not the last person who triggered it. The first, the room where you learned that love requires vigilance, where you discovered that warmth is something that leaves without explanation and that your job is to be ready when it does. That child deserved better, and they developed everything they had, every tool, every sensitivity, every capacity to read a room in response to not getting it. You are allowed to put it down. Not because the world is now safe enough that you never need to be careful, because the person you're with now is not that room, and until you can be fully in this room, undefended, unmonitored, genuinely present with someone who is here and has not left, you cannot know what it is you actually have. Healthy people don't back away from neediness because they're cold, or because they don't understand pain, or because they want something easy. They back away because something in them, something pre-verbal and accurate, recognizes that they are being asked to carry a weight they didn't create and cannot resolve. That's not a judgment on you if you've been needy. It's information. It tells you where the work is. Not in finding someone patient enough to endure the monitoring. In building a self secure enough that the monitoring becomes unnecessary. And that self, the one who doesn't need to check, who doesn't count the minutes between messages, who can sit in the space between contact without interpreting it as collapse. That self is not colder than who you are now. They're warmer, because they're actually there. If someone came to mind while you watched this, either someone you've pushed away, or a version of yourself you're still navigating, send this to them, or sit with it alone for a while first. Both are the right answer. We'll see you in the next one.